Minutes, yes, they rob and sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took out from the bottomless pit, my head was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Hey, what's up, troops? Jeff Evely, Ops Sgt-Maj with Veterans for Freedom, back with you now on this 10th day of May 2023. Lots going on out there as usual, and I see we got some of the regular watchers here with us. I was just trying to do the Mitislav. Is that how you say it? I hope that's how you say your name. Because we got a faithful watcher here, Mitislav, here from Toronto this morning. Thanks for being with us. Steve Robitaille is saying, best morning show on the planet. Thanks, brother. That is really encouraging. I really do appreciate all the positive feedback, guys. Good morning from Tabor, Alberta, says Debbie McKenzie. And here's Evelyn saying, morning, Jeff and all. And Cindy, very faithful watcher, probably my most faithful watcher. Cindy, I appreciate you. Morning, Jeff and chat. Hope all of you are having a great day. And here's Doings over on YouTube. How you doing, man? It's great to see you there. And And Dwayne is with us as well. Thanks, Dwayne, for being with us, brother. Okay, let's go ahead and see what's going on out there today. First of all, we have our philosophy meme. Here's Plato. And he says, good people do not need laws to tell them how to act responsibly. And we're going to get into a little bit about C21 coming up in the program. Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff about gun reform and what's the latest buzzword they're using? Assault style weapons, things like that. Obviously, like gun control laws are not there for those of us who handle guns responsibly. They're there to punish people who don't. And what we're doing right now is we're punishing all the responsible people. And that's backward, of course. So I thought that tied in fairly well with some of the themes we're going to be discussing here today. Okay, here's our meme for the day. This is gold. Elon Musk tweeted this out. Oh my God, this is so good. So if you're just watching, this is the Brokeback Mountain meme where you've got the one guy kind of hugging the other guy. Heath Ledger is hugging the other guy from behind, and he's saying, I wish I knew how to quit you. And Heath Ledger has CBC News on his cap. And the guy that he's hugging is Elon Musk. And he's got the Twitter logo on his hat. So that is awesome. That is gold. You know, they think that's this is in reference to the CBC throwing a little hissy fit there when they got labeled state-funded media accurately by Elon Musk. And there was the whole back and forth there where first they threw the hissy fit and said, we're under 70%. We're not completely government funded. And he came back and labeled them 70% government funded. And they said, we're less than 70%. He said, fine, 69% government funded. And it was all just really entertaining to watch. And now, what is this, like a week? CBC's like, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to punish you by leaving your platform. And everybody was like, no, they weren't. They were not like, please don't go at all. I think I retweeted it. They got ratioed to hell. And I was like, don't let the ratio hit you on the ass on your way out. Anyway, they came back. It's just, they're so gross, these people. Mother of all drummers is saying, good morning, Jeff, watching from Ontario. Welcome. Glad to have you aboard. Okay, so that is just pure gold from Elon Musk. And I couldn't help this. I got a second one here. Ashley St. Clair put this out. And this is the Step Brothers movie, where the two grown sons are just infantilized and they still play with toys in their 40s or whatever. So here they are, like they're step brothers, right? Their mother and their one guy's mother and the other guy's father, they get married, and now these guys, they're both losers who live at home and they got to live together and share a room and stuff like this. So, and anyway, so here's one of the brothers, and it's Tucker Carlson. He says, "Did we just become best friends?" And Elon Musk is looking back at him like, "Yup." Because what's going on with that? Well, here's Tucker Carlson. And so what he did is he signed up with Twitter. He's going to do his new show on Twitter. And you know what? I didn't even predict that. I think I said he's going to be just fine. I could see him going to somebody like The Blaze or even the Daily Wire or something like that. And he'll be better than ever. But he's bigger than all of those people, really. So it's no surprise that he might take a different tact on this. I mean, he can do that. So yeah, he's just going to be on Twitter Space doing a show, and I think it's going to be killer. Anyway, here's Jason Horton, and he's tweeting out, NBC, will anybody be able to police what Tucker Carlson says, or is this the point? Is it just a free-for-all? Okay, so let's watch the clip. This is just ridiculous.
Okay, well, listen, Twitter was already under fire from misinformation, disinformation, all-out lies, anti-Semitism, racism before Elon Musk took over, and now it's gotten kind of crazy, right? Seemingly unmoored, if you will. Will anybody be able to police what Carlson says, or is this the point? It's just a free-for-all.
I think this is the point. It is a free-for-all. It's what Elon Musk wants to provide. This move by Tucker may cement the idea of Twitter as a right-wing website.
Okay, well, listen.
Okay, so all kinds wrong with that, obviously. So it's incredible. The whole paradigm is inverted here because they're calling this a free-for-all, and they're saying that like it's a bad thing. And is this the point? Yes, this is the point. It's a free-for-all of speech. It's freedom of speech. That is the point. Yes, guys, that is how blissfully oblivious these guys are. This is Brian Stelter over here on the right. This is just a frickin' jellyfish of a man. Yeah, okay. So I talk all the time about how we're in a fourth turning. And a fourth turning is a crisis era. It happens every 4 generations. Neil Howe forecasted that we'd enter this crisis in the year 2020, plus or minus 2 years. And it has everything to do with changing demographics. The fact of the matter is that every generation basically takes a turn, wielding peak institutional power, running our society, and it's the boomers' turn. And every time a boomer generation, because this is the cycle of history, we go off to a major war, like total war, a major crisis happens. And the generation that surmounts the crisis, in this case, it was the GI generation who won the Second World War. Following the crisis, there's a population boom. They have a ton of kids, and the kids are raised as indulged, and it's going all the way back to the Garden of Eden. It's the same cycle over and over and over again. Population boom, and then that generation of indulged children come of age as self-righteous narcissists, and we have a couple of them right here in front of us. Just listen to these guys. I'll play it again one more time. It's a very short clip. Yeah, they come of age as self-righteous narcissists during the spiritual awakening of the Saculum, which is the Great Year. And during the spiritual awakening, they engage in like rioting and protests and stuff like this. And that's what we saw with the Summer of Love, with the boomer generation coming out into, or coming of age and going to university and boycotting the Vietnam War, those kinds of things. And when basically what happens is they form the factions in their early lives. Those factions struggle for dominance throughout the course of their lives. And when they reach peak institutional power in their elderhood, whatever factions are left as dominant, they go to war with one another. So anyway, Brian Stelter, I say this is kind of like, it's as if the cast of Seinfeld were running the West right now. We're running our society. Okay. That's what happened with Seinfeld. Is people were kind of looking around during the 80s and early 90s like, hey, what's up with all this yuppieism there, boomers? I thought you guys were supposed to be hippies. And then Seinfeld was like, yeah, we're just liars. And they made a whole show about how they're just liars and kind of terrible people. And that was what happened at the end of the series, is they all got put on trial for being rotten people. And Brian Stelter is essentially George Costanza. So it's not a lie if you believe it. That's what's going on here. George Costanza is teaching journalism at Harvard, and his name is Brian Stelter. So that's the era in which we live. And just listen to these guys, like, talk about self-righteous narcissists. And what happens in a fourth turning is the generation coming up behind the boomer generation, that's Generation X. They are the ones kind of standing it up to all. They're the whistleblower generation. Whether you're talking about Kyle Brown from Somalia or Julian Assange. And as you can see, like, the people that are leading the revolution right now that are advocating for free speech and standing up to the establishment, it's like Tucker Carlson, it's Dan Bongino. Okay. Like, it's the Gen Xers. And here we have the boomers just crapping all over the Gen Xers, just like they threw Kyle Brown under the bus for Somalia. Here you go.
Okay. Well, listen, Twitter,
like, just listen to these self-righteous narcissists.
Was already under fire from misinformation, disinformation, all-out lies, anti-Semitism, racism before Elon Musk took over. And now it's gotten kind of crazy, right? Seemingly unmoored, if you will. Will anybody be able to police what Carlson says? Or is this the point? It's just a free-for-all.
I think this is the point. It is a free-for-all. It's what Elon Musk wants to provide. This move by Tucker may cement the idea of Twitter as a right-wing website.
Freaking sleaze. What a sleaze. Okay, so there you go. Way to go, Boomer Mail. Okay, and here's Vigilant Fox on Twitter, at Vigilant Fox, and he says, he's grotesque. At Tucker Carlson takes aim at Justin Trudeau and the emergence of anti-human politics. And he's got some quotes in there. I think I'll just let Tucker do it himself.
Well, people hate Justin Trudeau there too. Yeah, if you go to like Alberta or Calgary, like you'll see hockey jerseys with like "fuck Trudeau," like signs on trucks. It's like real hate. What do you think about him?
Well, he's grotesque. I mean, he's not even like he's like Joe Biden. He's not even, I'm not mad at Justin Trudeau or whatever we're calling him. He's not even a real person. He's like a living metaphor, like our president. He is a repository for this weird, it's not even left or right, Democrat or Republican. It's so much bigger than that. It's this weird techno-based anti-human politics whose main message is you don't matter. Your life doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm.
And what matters instead is like obeying the people who are actually in charge, which is not heads of state, right? It's huge companies, honestly.
Yeah.
It's huge companies. And that's just like, who's the prime minister of England? Do you even know? No, we've had like 9 in the past month. No, Boris is gone.
Oh,
right. Exactly. That's the
some
point.
woman, right? It's a lady.
100 years ago, England was the most powerful country in the world, largest empire in human history. And now it's like, who's the prime minister again? It doesn't matter. They'll get another one next month. These things no longer, we're looking at it the wrong way. What matters is the ideas and who's propagating them. And it's an international group of companies and rich people. And Justin Trudeau is just a vessel for their ambitions. Mm-hmm. He doesn't believe anything. Justin Trudeau,
just to throw in my 2 cents on that. This is kind of what I've been saying is our politics in the fourth turning, it turns into kabuki theater where the politicians are just kind of the marionettes on the stage and the puppet masters behind the scenes. That's what he's talking about right now. It's these mega corporations and super CEOs or whatever. It's the boomer generation. It's the boomer generation of the investment class, the political donor class. And just as you saw in the previous clip, like, back in the 90s, they were pushing political correctness. I can remember this even like in my high school, where it was like, oh yeah, freedom of speech. You're free to express my opinions, Gen X. And yeah, that's just kind of how they are with all the other generations, really. The GIs that won the Second World War, they're a bunch of Archie bunkers. From in the boomer paradigm, I guess. So yeah, it wasn't just the case that they lectured their elders about all this supposed warmongering. And Vietnam was the second Indochina War. It was an effort to contain the Chinese Communist Party and its allies. It was perfectly legal and perfectly justified, but that's kind of beside the point. But they come of age as self-righteous narcissists, like I said, and they engage in all of these terrorism and protests and stuff like that in their early lives against their elders. And those of us coming up behind them, we're more like their elders. Like it's actually the case that that's how generations work. We have more in common at each stage of our lives with our grandparents than we do with our parents. We're more like the generation that shaped our parents than the generation that shaped us, which is our parents. And it's because the human species has daddy issues. Okay. And that's what we're trying to work beyond at this point. If we're ever going to get beyond a point where, we're caught in this cycle of total war and collapse, we got to move past all these daddy issues that we have as a species. And okay. All right. I'll get back to the clip.
He thought, it would be advantageous to him to push Nazism or Marxism. It doesn't even matter. Like none of these things are real. It's just about control.
Yeah.
And the way you control people is
he's just the vessel. That's Trudeau. He's just the vessel for all this.
By convincing them, this is like your classic kind of alcoholic parent thing, convincing them that they're worthless and they don't deserve better. Like, shut up. Who cares what you think? We don't want to hear what you have to say.
Right.
Your ambitions to like make enough money to send your kids to summer camp or retire happily. Like that's irrelevant. Like, shut up. You don't deserve it. Go kill yourself. And so they break people's spirits. So I'm telling the truth. And I can tell that that I am.
He's from Canada too.
Right. But it's happening in the United States too. I'm not just singling out Canada here at all. It's happening all over the West in every English speaking country, Australia, New Zealand. Mm-hmm. These were real countries like 5 years ago. They're not anymore.
Yeah.
And the people have been broken. Their spirit has been broken. And if you watch this, you're like, why would Australians allow their government to put people in concentration camps, which they did? That's real.
They were even more pussy than Canadians.
Completely.
Yeah.
And like, where's the Australian spirit? Like wrestling alligators? Isn't this a country of ex-cons? It was a penal colony. Like, where's their spirit? Well, it's gone. It's totally broken,
Yeah.
Mao's Cultural Revolution, destroy the four olds. Old habits, old thinking, old customs, old traditions.
Well, people hate.
So, yeah, good clip there, Tucker. He's very much in tune with what's going on. And I'm glad that he's paying special attention to Canada. Also, I did see, because he was doing a whole docu-series just on Canada with Fox, and because he's fired, I guess, they're now scrapping that docu-series. So that may have been a contributing factor, I guess, in the decision making. Perhaps, I don't know. But yeah, that is unfortunate that we're going to lose that. So here's CNN. This is a real tweet. It's at CNN, and they're like gold checkmarked and the whole thing. And they say right wing extremist Tucker Carlson will launch his program on Twitter, a platform he praised as the only remaining large free speech platform in the world after Fox News fired him late last month. Unbelievable. They're flat out calling Tucker Carlson a right wing extremist. So yeah, I mean, anybody who stands up to this agenda to demoralize and turn us all into livestock, they're a right wing extremist. And this is right out of the playbook, right out of the Marxist playbook. Okay, this is what Hegel said about dealing with the reactionaries. I think it was Hegel, might have been Marx, but anyway, we're the reactionaries. Anybody who stands up to the agenda is called a reactionary, and that's even in our universities now, where anybody right of center is referred to as a reactionary. And yeah, that's what they do is they just marginalize the hell out of us, right? So they make us all out to be dangerous extremists. And got a couple of questions coming in here. Gloria's asking, who do we vote for to change this crap? I try not to politicize the show because it's the Veterans for Freedom show. I'm open about the fact that I'm a card-carrying member of the People's Party of Canada. And like everyone, I have biases. So I think it's important to make you guys aware of where those biases are. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm going to say. Who do we vote for to change this crap? Vote for Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada, because they are the only ones who were against this from the very beginning. Maxime Bernier was willing to get arrested to defy the mandates and travel. And, I'm afraid the Conservatives, they didn't seem to have a word to say about the widespread human rights abuses in Canada until the trucker convoy showed up in Ottawa, and even then it was lukewarm. And so I spit you from my mouth. That's what I think. That's my personal opinion. But like I said, that's just my analysis. And all this stuff. Never forget that 100% of the Commons voted in favor of C4 to jail any parent who takes their gender dysphoric child for counseling from a qualified therapist. They call it the conversion therapy bill. Again, that's an inversion of what's really happening. I mean, they're the ones performing the biomedical gender transitions. So that is the conversion, converting somebody from their natal sex to permanent medical patient, livestock for big pharma. That's the conversion. But if you want to provide counseling to somebody to help them to feel comfortable in the body in which they were born, that is the conversion, according to everybody in the House of Commons, both sides of the aisle. And PPC is the only one saying, no, stay away from the kids. So Jane is asking, how do I reach out to people, at least to those who want some guidance? To whom can they even turn? That's a great question. And there aren't any gurus. There aren't any wise men, I don't think, out there in the fourth turning. There's all the guys that we thought were wise, the boomer males. I'll say Sam Harris is a really good example for me personally, because I read all of his books and listened to his very first podcast when it launched, and I was a regular listener of his podcast for years. And then the Trump phenomenon came to town, and it was like, whoa, okay, this guy's just a California liberal. He's a total snowflake. He completely fell apart, and he's totally irrational in this one area. So yeah, who are the wise men? Noam Chomsky? No. So on and so forth. But I think we got to do it ourselves. I'm going to say share this out, because I always forget to say that. I never tell people to share my stuff, but yeah, share this out. I'm doing my best. I think like a lot of what I talk about with the philosophy memes and coping strategies, and just helping to understand, I think, what's happening and the reasons, the root causes for this kind of a crisis, is helpful. It helps to understand. And in order to solve a problem, you must first understand it. I mean, you might get lucky on a crapshoot, but that was always my approach throughout the course of my career and my life is like, okay, this is a problem. What do I do? Well, understand it. If I understand it, I can fix it. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here with this program. So go ahead and share it out. And maybe we should start doing like a call-in show. I should maybe do that once a week or something. I've been meaning to do that for a while. Okay, here's real Andy Lee, and she's been awesome throughout all of this. And she says, the president of the Canadian Community Services Association that met with Xi Jinping last week knew how, with Liberal MPs Han Dong and Parm Bains in 2022. Han Dong received an award. PRC Consul Wang Shenzheng thanked the organization for promoting the reunification of China. And the reunification of China means the conquering of Taiwan by China. That's what they mean when they say reunification. Because the PRC sees Taiwan as a rogue province, and they even the United States, they bought into that under Obama in particular. I'm not sure when they first made it a matter of public policy, but yeah, the one-child policy, that was something that everybody made a big deal about when Trump first took office, and he took a call from the president of Taiwan. And that was verboten. The entire media went berserk because he took a call from the president of Taiwan, and that was against the one China policy. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, what do you mean you have a one China policy? You don't recognize Taiwan? Why don't we recognize Taiwan? Well, nobody does. WHO wouldn't recognize them when they put them on the spot during an interview in the early pandemic. Well, because the WHO is controlled by China. But MP Han Dong, he's the guy who kept the Michaels in, presumably. He's the guy who kept the Michaels in prison longer than they needed to be, because it was an inopportune time for the Liberals politically for them to be released. They wanted them to stay in longer because if they got released, then that would have been, I don't know, advantageous to the Conservatives somehow. So anyway, that's apparently what happened. And Han Dong, he stepped down, but he's still in Parliament, and he did vote nay on the Chinese interference. The Chinese interference inquiry, public inquiry. So yeah, there was the vote in the Commons. It was like 170 to 140, something like that, and in favor of the inquiry. And he was one of the ones who voted voted for it. So, or voted against it. Sorry. Okay, so that's there you go. Like Chinese, they got their tentacles into everybody here. So. So here's global news, and they say, here's globalist news, and they say Meta set to block news on Facebook, Instagram from Canadian users. So this is just absurd. So this is the link text, and which bill is this? I lose track of them. There's so many. It's like C18, or is it C11? No, C18. They're talking about C18. Let's go ahead and check this video out. Oh.
Understand the legislation. We do have cross-functional teams working to understand the legislation and to prepare for the removal of news on our platforms, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Curtin. I appreciate the way you answer the questions. So let me ask the question then. Per the whistleblowers in Australia, the team that was created for Australia was required to sign NDAs in an unprecedented way. So not the existing NDA that you signed as an employee of Facebook, but a special project-related NDA. Has anybody within Meta been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement in conjunction with planning for the content blocking in Canada?
Thank you, Mr. Housefather. I can only speak for the Canadian team. We have not been asked to sign anything like you reference.
Are there others outside of Canada that would be on this team?
Yeah, we have a broad cross-functional team, Mr. Housefather, working on this file, working to understand the legislation. working to prepare for the ending of the availability of news on our platforms. So it is a large team, yes.
Okay, perfect. And are you aware of any documents that have been created to prepare for the content blocking?
Thank you, Mr. Hosfather. I don't know if you're referring to specific documents. Certainly that team's work is underway, and in the normal course of business, they would be, of course, recording the work they do.
Okay, so the committee in its order from March the 20th had requested to receive these documents. I'm wondering, Ms. Kern, if you could tell me why then they haven't been produced yet?
Thank you, Mr. Hesfather. Yes, my colleague, Mr. Chan, said we're working to comply with the committee's order for document production. We've just got to make sure that we respect confidentiality and various other legal considerations. So we're taking the advice of our legal counsel on this and working very closely with them to make sure that what we're providing is in accordance with all of the laws and rules around these documents.
Whistleblowers disclosed multiple company documents in the United States to the United States Department of Justice. As part of a deck, one slide called Product Readiness Timeline states, ideal takedown timing is after legislation has been passed by Senate, but before it receives royal assent. This is again the Australian example. The same deck shows that takedown plans needed to be ready for February 5th, a week before Facebook expected earliest passage of the bill. Ms. Curran, that would seem to indicate that takedown was essentially to maximize negotiating leverage in Australia. Is the Canadian model similar, or is the threat similar to what was happening in Australia to maximize negotiating leverage, or is it different?
Thank you, Mr. Hesfather. I can confirm that, look, the way Australia unfolded was not ideal. There were some technical errors made in the way that we removed news from our platform. We fully intend that those errors will not be made in the Canadian context, and we're preparing very carefully to ensure that that's the case. We're going to make sure that we're fully transparent with Canadians, with parliamentarians, as we move towards news removal, if we're forced to do that. And of course, Mr. Housefather, that's going to depend on the final scope of C-18, and we don't want to preempt the work of the Senate in that regard.
Is currently working on what I perceive to be a threat to parliamentarians in our democracy, saying that you will respond if Bill C-18 is passed in the Senate. Is that product team examining at this point limiting access by Canadians to emergency services information? You can understand that when it is an emergency, people need information immediately, that Meta did that in Australia, and Meta may be looking at doing that in Canada. I find absolutely reprehensible.
Thank you, Mr. Julian, and through the chair, no, it's our intention that none of those pages that are not in fact news pages will be blocked or removed from access for Canadians. And so we were working very carefully to ensure that doesn't happen. And Mr. Julian, this is a business decision that we're being forced to make by this legislation. We wish we were not in this position. We don't want to have to make this decision. But if we are forced to make it, we will remove news in a way that's very careful, that is responsible, that is transparent. We'll make sure Canadians still have access to emergency pages, to government pages, to community service organizations,
thank you.
and to politicians' pages as well, Mr. Julian.
Thank you. It didn't happen in Australia. Reprehensibly, Meta blocked access for Australians. And I think you're not reassuring us today that Meta will not do the same thing.
Okay, so I'm curious to see how that all plays out, especially like if they're saying they're blocking news sources, does that mean they're just going to block all the mainstream stuff and we'll still have access to, say, Substack? Because, you know, the government seems to be in the business of determining who is and who is not news. And I mean, with somebody like Tucker Carlson going to Twitter, how, like, I know that's not Meta, but, you know, how is that going to be managed? Well, I guess one potential outcome would be that all of the state media stuff that is actually problematic ends up getting banned, because those are the official sources. Those are endorsed by the state. And so they're trying to get, with this legislation, they're trying to get Meta to pay these outlets every time somebody posts a link to one of their articles. But of course, what Meta is going to do is they're just going to start blocking those links to those sources. So if they block the links to those sources, well, then what remains? Is Substack going to be blocked? I don't think so. Nobody's, nobody at Substack, I don't think, is expecting to get paid. So, so yeah, I'm optimistic that this could totally blow up in their faces. Okay, so who am I looking at here? Vancouver Sun. Okay, so they say head of non-political BC group meets Xi Jinping at gathering of fresh troops. Chinese state media videos and photos show Canadian Community Services Association President Liu Hao attending the 10th Conference for Friendship Overseas Associations. So I think I got that out of order a little bit. Sorry about that. But the head of a British Columbia-based group says that it is a non-political organization helping Chinese integrate into Canadian society. Traveled to Beijing to meet President Xi Jinping at a government conference this week. Chinese state media videos and photos show Canadian Community Service Association President Liu Hao attending the, quote, 10th Conference for Friendship of Overseas Chinese Associations, close quote, hosted by the State Council's Overseas Chinese Affairs Office. Liu is seen applauding with the group on Monday during Xi's entry into the conference, which state media says involved representatives from 130 countries, and is also seen in a group picture with the Chinese leader. Chinese state media says Shi Taifang, head of Chinese United Front Work Department's Central Committee, told conference attendees that they serve as, quote, an important bridge and bond, close quote, between China and the rest of the world. She told groups they are, quote, fresh troops, close quote, in China's effort to develop, quote, shared future of mankind, close quote, as part of the, quote, great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And I talk a lot about the art of war, going back to the 5th century BC. China has kind of seen herself as being the natural ruling kingdom of Earth's like Middle Earth, that kind of thing. And there is that history of the Red Emperor, where they basically just kind of keep other neighboring nations weakened, and so that they never really rise to the same level of power as China, and they can remain dominant, and all of the surrounding kingdoms need to pay homage to the Red Emperor. Like, they have kings, but those kings pay homage to the Red Emperor. And I think that's basically what they're doing on a global scale right now, especially with the Belt and Road Initiative, where they engage in all that debt trap diplomacy overseas. That's what happened to Sri Lanka. That's imploded, and I believe that that's what they're trying to do here in Canada as well, as they're trying to implode the state. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And when they talk about, their fresh troops, shared future for mankind, yeah. I always remember commentary on some of their verbiage used at the UN, where they're endorsing things like multi-bilateralism, as instead of bilateralism or multilateralism. It's multi-bilateralism, where if Canada wants to do a deal with the United States, they just go through China. So yeah, this is all about centralization of power in China, I believe. Okay, so I think that's probably enough on that article for now, but you get the idea. Okay, and here's the CCFR, and they're saying there's still time to contact your MP and demand that they not support the Liberals' latest motion on C21. Let's go. Find your MP here. So check them out there. You can find your MP and contact your MP. Tell them to vote against the Liberal motion on C21. Hashtag scrap C21. So yeah, C21 is the gun grab, and this is all very much in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goal on disarmament. That's one of the SDGs. And, Trudeau says they're advancing the SDGs and the Great Reset, and the pandemic has provided an opportunity, and blah, blah, blah. So Yeah, and the UN is, I'm viewing it basically as a proxy for China at this point. And a lot of this stuff around even climate change, I think, is it all fits within the guiding mantra of whatever weakens the West is true. And so the disarmament agenda, I mean, well, who wants to have a population, completely disarmed? Somebody who fears good people may shoot them for what they're about to do next. And yeah, I think it has everything to do with just weakening us as a society, especially weakening the individual, and softening us up for authoritarian takeover. Okay, so this is Polling Canada, and they're tweeting the federal polling here, and it looks like the Liberal Party of Canada is actually getting a shit kicking here by the Conservative Party of Canada. We've got the CPC leading at 35%. They're up 1 point. And the LPC, Liberal Party of Canada, is at 28%, down 5. So that's a pretty huge shift. But it looks like more went over to the NDP side because they're up 4. And my party there, PPC, is down 2. I'm skeptical, quite frankly, obviously. But anyway, I'm biased, so maybe I won't even dive into that right now. But here we go. This is pretty typical. Who can reply? People at Canadian polling mentioned can reply, so that's almost nobody. Okay, so, but anyway, the good news is the Liberals are down 5 points. And that's huge. That's huge. 5 points. That's insane. Actually, if I go back, I think that's probably the biggest differential that you'll see. Like everything else is +1, +4. That's pretty huge. But -5, that's massive. So good to highlight those signs of progress wherever we can. Okay, here's Garnet Genius, and he says the Trudeau Foundation's governance is a mess, giving members of one family privilege control of a government-funded government institution is not consistent with the idea of a, quote, just society. So yeah, well done, Garnet. Check this out. This is about 4 minutes.
Today to speak about the Trudeau Foundation. The Trudeau Foundation is the talk of the town in many ways, so it's important to review what the foundation actually is. Because the Trudeau Foundation is a curious beast. As far as its structure and its governance goes, it's kind of a chameleon, conveniently identifying as a charity some of the time and as a government institution at other times. And similarly, the Prime Minister identifies as sort of involved and sort of not involved. And these blurred lines make the Trudeau Foundation, and through it, the government, highly vulnerable to foreign interference. So let me explain. The Trudeau Foundation was created as a family foundation with a protected role in its governance for members of the Trudeau family. But then the Liberal government of Jean Chrétien, through Minister Alan Rock, decided to give the foundation $125 million of taxpayers' money without actually changing the role of the Trudeau family in its governance. So it became a government-funded and, in law, a government institution, according to the Information and Privacy Act, but it retained a protected role in its governance for members of one family. A government-funded government institution that is also a family foundation with a protected role in its governance for one family. And I think this is incredibly bizarre in a free and democratic and egalitarian nation. Giving members of one family privileged control of a government-funded government institution is not consistent with the idea of a just society.
Nice.
Now, the Trudeau Foundation is controlled by 30 members. Up to 4 of those members are appointed by the Trudeau family, and 6 are appointed by the Minister of Industry. In its governance, the Trudeau Foundation directly fuses the intellectual estate of the Trudeau family with the Government of Canada, and that is just wrong. Now, the Prime Minister himself, incredibly, is and remains a member of the Trudeau Foundation. He has professed repeatedly and seems to want us to take at face value the claim that he's not involved, not at all involved in the Trudeau Foundation, that he hasn't been involved for years. But that's wrong. He is involved, Madam Speaker. He's involved in a number of ways. First, the Prime Minister of Canada is necessarily involved by virtue of the fact that he appoints the Minister of Industry, who appoints 6 members. He is involved because his brother is a member of the foundation and his half-sister is on the board of directors. And he's involved because he himself is a member of the foundation. He hasn't resigned. He remains a member of the foundation. It bears his name. And whether or not he goes to the meetings, that membership that he retains matters for effective control should he choose to exercise it at any point. And it demonstrates his deep personal investment in the Trudeau Foundation. The personal investment is precisely why a foreign government has sought to curry favor with him through funneling money to the Trudeau Foundation. The system is clearly broken, and the worn-out talking points the government is using clearly don't hold water. The structure is quite evidently broken even before we start talking about the issue of what happened in this instance of foreign interference.
Yeah, the structure is broken because it has conflicts of interest built into it. It's astonishing to me, like some of the stuff that's coming out, because it's not something I've ever thought about. Like, what is the how is the Trudeau Foundation established? And it's this melding together of this dynastic family and government of Canada. It's like he says, like, this is straight up like monarchical.
Because it is this crude hybrid between a family foundation and a government institution. Its charitable face solicits direct donations from foreign entities, while its government face sits by and smiles. And the Prime Minister, known, by the way, for wearing many faces, smiles all the more. You see, Madam Speaker, Canada Post wouldn't collect money from foreign political parties, nor would it allow members of a former Prime Minister's family to have a locked-in role in its leadership. That's because Canada Post is part of the government. Now, the Canadian Cancer Society would potentially get donations from abroad, but it likely wouldn't be a target for foreign interference because it's not closely tied to the government and doesn't bear the Prime Minister's name. It's purely a charity. You have roles for government institutions and you have roles for charity. But the problem is the Trudeau Foundation is trying to have its cake and eat it too. It's trying to be both. The vulnerabilities are not only obvious, but they're built into the structure of this organization. And members of the Trudeau family exploited those vulnerabilities to take the foreign money.
Okay, nice job, Garnet Genius. And Jumper Jed 67 over on Rumble is saying, just a thought, does your fourth turning construct have different timelines, say, from the West compared to communist China? So it can, but basically it seems to be the case that perhaps through contact with the West, that much broader swaths of the globe and humanity are caught in this cycle. And I point to like the Second World War. Just take a look at what was going on around the world. Everybody went to war, including in China. That was the Communist Revolution. So that was happening concurrent to the Second World War. And Xi Jinping is a boomer. So it does seem to fit the model that they're caught in the same cycle that we are. And who knows how long this is. Well, I mean, I say back to the Garden of Eden because that's my read of a lot of the stories that our ancestors wrote. Is we keep seeing this elder prophet figure. So that is the generational archetype of the boomers. There's only 4 generational archetypes that just keep repeating. And the prophet generational archetype, as in the prophet Muhammad, as in the prophets who found our religions or the patriarchs of the Old Testament. We represent them in our stories as an old man with a long gray beard. And if you just take a look at our stories, we tend to write a lot more about the hard times than the good. And whether it's Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, Noah, whenever one of these older prophet figures shows up, it's hard times for the rest of us. So that seems to be the cycle. And yeah, I do think that communist China is caught in the same cycle. If there are places in the world that are not, I'm not even really sure. Perhaps Africa. I'm not, because they seem to have weathered the pandemic fairly reasonably. They had mass distribution of anti-malarial drugs because they're antiviral. So. And their vaccination rates are among the lowest, and they seem to have the best, some of the best survival rates as well. So maybe Africa is not caught in this cycle, but perhaps Eurasia and I would say the Western Hemisphere as well. If you look to South America right now, they're caught in this pandemic crisis as well. It just seems like Africa are the only ones that are completely destroying themselves over this. Not that they have much to destroy, sad to say. Okay, and here's Gardner Genius again, and he says, alert, if you live in BC and are a public sector worker, your pension funds may be invested in companies complicit in the Uyghur genocide. So thanks to @HK Watch for your work on this. So here he is again, killing it today, Garnet.
Mr. Garand, you represent the British Columbia Investment Management Corporation, or BCI, which invests on behalf of major public sector clients in British Columbia, teachers, university employees, municipal employees, etc. Your company, according to a report from Hong Kong Watch, invested about $35 million in Hikvision as one example. Hikvision is directly complicit in the persecution and genocide of Uyghurs. Hikvision actually has developed ethnic facial recognition technology, that is, cameras that identify Uyghurs and marks them out for particular persecution. Do you think the people you're investing for would find this acceptable?
What I would say is we're not very happy with some of the components of the index, and we're doing something about it. But that's
or to divest from the index. Are you prepared to divest from the index on that basis?
Actually, what we're doing is we're engaging with index providers to improve what they put in the index.
I mean, you're still putting the money into it, sir. Do you think your members, the people you're investing on behalf of, would find that acceptable?
What I would say is there are issues linked with indexing, and we're active in tackling those issues. There are different ways of doing it. We've usually done engagement, and if engagement doesn't work, there are other ways to deal with it.
Yeah, I think one obvious way would be to not invest in companies that are complicit in genocide, sir. Like, frankly, I don't know how you sleep at night with your complete inability to answer these basic questions.
Yeah, give it to him. Good job, Garnet Genius. Got that dig in there. Yeah, it's pretty despicable what's happening. And I've pointed to these pension funds and the Canada Pension Plan as a source of a lot of this misery as well. And it's because of all this kind of arm's distance investing that they do. Like, they just kind of outsource the portfolio to these mutual funds and things like that to just make as much money as possible. And so there's just no accountability there. Everybody's just kind of hands off, or at least arm's distance. And it's just like the mortgage bond market crisis that led to the collapse of 2008, where, there's no accountability. The guy who's issuing the mortgage just sells it the next day to one of these bondsmen, and if the lendee can't pay the mortgage, then it's no skin off the nose of the guy who lent the money in the first place. And so that removes this layer of accountability, and I think that's what's happening here as well. It's somewhat analogous. Is it removes this layer of accountability, where it's like they're not even aware of the kinds of investments that a lot of these people are making in our names. Mitslav is saying, with respect, Muhammad was no prophet. And with respect, Jeff, Muhammad was no prophet. And yeah, I see some of your other comments and stuff up there. And you know what, brother, I'm definitely not going to disagree with that. I don't think any of them are prophets. I don't believe in prophets myself. Personally, I'm an atheist. And like I said, every time one of those old men with the long gray beard shows up, the elder prophet, every time the elder prophet shows up, it's hard times for the rest of us. And what are the rest of us doing? Well, we're dying. And if you go all the way back now, it's not as clear. I think it gets more and more vague the further back that you go. But if I take you as far back as, say, Cain and Abel, in my assessment, Cain is the elder prophet figure. He's the prophet when he reaches peak institutional power and things kind of start falling apart. And basically what the story is about is, there's this incompetent old man who is a farmer like his daddy. And what they say in the story is that God favors Abel's offering over Cain's. He doesn't favor Cain. And what I think this means, because they're talking about the burnt offering where they're making sacrifices to Yahweh, and Cain is the farmer, like Adam was in my read of the story, and he's not prosperous is what's happening, right? He's not a very good farmer, it turns out. And they're saying that God doesn't favor his offering. Well, I think what he means is he's not as prosperous as Abel. And Abel went off and did something different himself. He innovated probably a new kind of technology, which was herding, and he was a shepherd. So he went off and did his own thing with livestock, and Cain kind of fell apart. And it's a story about the deadly sin of envy, where Cain murders Abel. But here's the thing: it's like, you know, the Flanders is where Ralph, or sorry, not Ralph, but Rod and Todd are asking Ned, you know, where all the other people came from. So they're like, did where Cain and Abel, like their families came from, or all the additional people. They're like, did they have sex with their mommy or with each other? So yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about the number of people that they have in these stories. But what they're doing, what I believe is happening, is our ancestors tended to represent generations as archetypes, as an individual that was sort of representative of the entire generation. And so, and you'll see that in Genesis. If you read Genesis, it says, these are the generations of Adam. That's what it says. So I don't think that they're literal stories that are an accurate representation of the population at that time. I think they tended to represent groups of people as individuals that were sort of representative of those groups and of generations in particular. So yeah, and what we see in if you look at it through that lens, what we see with the story of Cain and Abel is probably the world's first genocide, or at least the one that was documented. That's a genocide. It's the killing of a generation. Abel is representative of the generation, actually the generational archetype of the nomad, which is Generation X, and that's what happens in the witch hunts of Europe as well. Like Luther was a midlifer, and actually, according to Strauss-Howe generational theory, he was the midlife nomad. Like he was the one who leads the revolution. Essentially, stands up to the corrupt hegemony. So Abel is representative of the generation. They kill off a generation, and every time you see that elder prophet figure coming back, you see Abraham, for example. He's perfectly willing to sacrifice his own son, and his hand is stayed by an angel, not by himself and not by God, but by an angel. And I think so. Basically, our ancestors tended to deify their leaders, and their leaders tended to be elders, and so they tended to deify those at peak institutional power, Yahweh, Abraham. And you see that elder prophet figure with the long gray beards, and he is deified in the stories, like they're the patriarchs. And so if they're the deities, then and angels are kind of like demigods, they're somewhere between humans and gods. If the elders are the gods, then the angels would be the midlifers, it seems. So I think what we're seeing there is another attempt at a genocide, when you've got an incompetent old man in charge and everything falls apart and he starts scapegoating everybody else. That is what they did. They were scapegoaters. And he's willing to sacrifice. He's willing to commit a genocide. I think he's blaming all the young people, like they do in the military, for the sexual misconduct scandals, when in fact it's all their fault. It's the boomers' fault. They were the ones doing that, and they were in charge the whole time. So yeah, they blame the young people, and they're perfectly content to sacrifice them. And it's the midlife generation that's coming up behind them that stays his hand in that case. And anyway, so in every case, every time one of these guys comes back, that's what's happening to the rest of us, is we're dying. And I think what we have in the case of Muhammad is just the example of one of these prophet figures in a more clear light of history. That's what we're seeing. And the more detailed it gets, the more brutality we see them engaging in, the elder prophet figure. So and now, you know, with the stories that we've written of the previous fourth turning, like say, for example, Orwell, I think that we've gained a heck of a lot more insight as we go as to what these people are really like, because that's what's happening is we're living in Orwellian nightmare. Okay, so that was quite a sidebar, guys. Pardon me, but I'll continue on here. Back to the Canadian stuff.
Mr. Garand, you mentioned
question,
represent the British Columbia.
Thanks for that, and I'm glad I got a chance to address that. Okay, and here's Holly Doan, and she's saying 10% of Canada's pension plan is Chinese investments. At CPP Investments rates China a good investment despite human rights atrocities. Quote, we are exceedingly cautious, close quote. That's Michael Leduc, senior manager. So this is Blacklock's. I don't have an account with these guys. We'll check this out really quick. But that's a lot of what I've been saying is, yeah, the Canada Pension Plan is essentially evil. They're just there making money, and there's all kinds of exploitation that's happening, and we're all kind of blind to it because they've distanced themselves from this accountability. They put themselves at arm's distance. So yeah, it's just the same thing she just wrote here. So. Said Mike Leduc, senior managing director with the board, quote, we recognize any investments in China need to be handled with care. Well, I'd like to get a closer look at that. I've gone to the CPP's website to try and get a better look at their investment portfolio, but all they do is just refer to these, like account managers or whatever, these hedge funds, different investing groups that manage the portfolio for them. So you can't even, I couldn't even seem to drill down and see what it was they were investing in our names, by the way. So here's Danielle Smith, and it all goes back to the pensions, guys. That's why the economy needs to continue growing all the time. And, you know, the argument for immigration is that the economy needs to keep growing. Why does the economy need to keep growing? It's because of the way these pension plans are structured. They're not going to be solvent unless we have continuous growth. It's just how kind of like blue chip investing works. It depends on this idea that the economy continues getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the only reason it needs to. That's the only reason it needs to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, without a population growth, the economy needs to continue to grow in order to keep the pension plan solvent. And so yeah, it's quite the pickle we got ourselves in here. So here's Danielle Smith, and she says, while at Rachel Notley and the NDP obsessed with handing out free hard drugs and the defunding of police, the UCP is focused on making our streets safer for Alberta families. Today, we announced violent offenders out on bail will be monitoring for 24/7 with an ankle bracelet on May 29th. Vote for safer communities. Vote United Conservatives. So here's Danielle Smith. Yeah, she's doing good on this front.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you all for being here today. I'm pleased to be joined by Mike Ellis, United Conservative Party candidate in Calgary West and former police officer. Almost every day, Albertans wake up to news that someone in their city or community has been attacked, or even worse. Just yesterday, Edmonton Police Chief Dale McPhee spoke about the horrific murder of a mother and her 11-year-old child in broad daylight. Chief McPhee expressed great frustration that the accused was well known to police, having a history dating back to 2009 that included multiple charges. Victims of crime are people's daughters, sons, parents, friends, and loved ones. And most often, the perpetrators of these crimes have been released on bail, some multiple times. In Edmonton in the last 2 years, 26 homicides were committed by criminals out on bail. And in Calgary, 23 of the 45 people charged with homicide in 2021, 2022, and 2023 so far were out on bail. 7 of those were bound by firearms prohibitions. The Liberal NDP soft on crime approach is costing lives, and Albertans and all Canadians deserve better. The United Conservative Party stands with our provincial partners, demanding the federal government end the system of catch and release, plaguing our communities, and reform our bail system.
I just want to say that I'm glad she's choosing this terminology here, the catch and release program, because that was what they called it when Obama did it. And it does seem to be the case that we're following the same game plan here in Canada that they've been doing in the United States, especially since Trudeau got in. The Trudeau regime is kind of analogous to the Obama regime. Like crazy out there, progressive, and the catch and release policy, I think, fits with the model of whatever weakens the West is true. That's the art of war, and that's what they do, is they just kind of flood us with fighting age males from countries that hate us, and they'll ISIS will kill me for the Chinese, and they won't have to worry about us. Good on Danielle Smith for adopting that terminology, because I think that the progressives are importing the same strategy from the Obama regime into Canada now.
Voices in Alberta and Canada are growing stronger. Momentum for change is building. And I'm here to tell you, enough is enough. We will not wait on the federal government. We will take action to ensure Albertans feel safe again, and we will do whatever it takes to ensure they do. So today, I'm announcing the United Conservative Party's Safe Streets Action Plan, a comprehensive set of measures to restore safety to Alberta's cities, communities, and public transit. This plan will crack down on criminals with ankle bracelet monitoring of dangerous offenders out on bail and deploying sheriffs to monitor them. It'll mean 100 more patrol officers on the streets, brand new anti-fentanyl and anti-gun tracking teams, as well as more funding for internet child exploitation and gang suppression units. It will also make it easier for moms and dads to know the whereabouts of violent and sexual offenders and make investments in women's shelters and sexual assault counseling. The Safe Streets Action Plan will build on some of the United Conservative government's successes in keeping our streets and communities safe. In early February, we deployed the Alberta Sheriffs to Edmonton and Calgary to work alongside the Edmonton and Calgary Police Services to respond to crime and social disorder. In the first weeks of the pilot programs in Alberta's major cities, more than 4,500 outstanding arrest warrants were executed and close to 400 charges were laid. That's why a re-elected UCP government will extend the pilot projects to the end of the year and beyond that if necessary. Having more boots on the ground, patrolling our streets and communities is working, and we know that more boots on the ground are needed to continue protecting Albertans, which is why our United Conservatives will keep our commitment to add 100 more officers to help Edmonton and Calgary address chronic and worsening crime, particularly in downtowns and on transit. Their sole duty will be to patrol streets to ensure people are protected. And we know Alberta sheriffs have the skills and ability to further help in the protection of Alberta families and the safety of Alberta streets. And that's why, in addition to extending the pilot project, we'll expand the use of Alberta sheriffs in the 24/7 bail monitoring process for higher risk offenders released on bail. With the assistance of the Alberta sheriffs, we will ensure that criminals out on bail when they shouldn't be have more eyes on them. There is no free pass in Alberta. And to better monitor violent or sexual offenders out on bail, a re-elected UCP government will provide ankle bracelets. A re-elected United Conservative government would establish specialized sheriff-led anti-fentanyl and anti-gun trafficking units to target illegal supplies coming across the U.S. border. Fentanyl is a scourge on our families and our communities. Alberta has a world-leading approach to addictions and mental health, and the United Conservative Party is here for any Albertan trapped in a deadly and destructive spiral so that they can heal and reach their full potential. But we need to be able to stop drugs before they reach Alberta's streets, and that's why these units are so crucial. Specialized teams have the ability to focus on a single priority instead of being pulled in multiple directions. And that's why United Conservatives are also committed to increased funding for specialized gang suppression units through the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams, or ALERT. Because gang violence isn't just a threat to individuals, it's a threat to our communities and to our children. As part of this increased funding, the UCP will look to create a provincial cybercrime unit, a provincial DNA lab, and help ALERT increase its monitoring of expensive catalytic converter thefts, which is increasingly used to fund gang activity. And will provide additional funding to ALERT's internet child exploitation team to ensure fewer children are victimized and offenders are brought to justice. Albertans should be able to walk downtown and walk in their communities without having to look over their shoulders. This is non-negotiable. And we have a right to take public transit without fear of crime and open-air drug use. We will address gang violence, expand access to mental health and addiction treatments, and keep violent and sexual offenders off our streets. We are putting criminals on notice that Albertans will no longer tolerate being harassed and frightened or victimized. We will do whatever it takes for Albertans to feel safe on their streets, in their homes, in their communities, and riding public transit, period. And the United Conservative Party's Safe Streets Action Plan will do just that. Thank you.
All right, so pretty good on Danielle Smith. And, you know, from what I've seen from her, like, not too bad, pretty good. The only thing is, like, she got in there and, I mean, they're still prosecuting people for mass violations and stuff like that. So she's making the same mistake that Trump made. If Trump just had gutted the state when he got in there and got the Obama loyalists out of the deep state, like if he just had fired the boomers, then he would have had a much more successful term. Not that it wasn't an outstanding success overall, but yeah, she seems to be making the same mistake. The Justice Department that failed to protect us is still the same Justice Department. Like there hasn't really been that level of reform. But I mean, I'm always giving credit where credit is due, and you know, I think that overall she's definitely a force for good out there. So we'll continue to watch her. All right, and here she is again. Danielle Smith's comments here are 1,000% correct. This is Joe Blow, and he says, no need to apologize, no need to clarify. The last 3 years were an absolute abomination. So here she is, about a minute 25.
I noticed you're not wearing a poppy. I'm not wearing a poppy, but they ruined it for me this year. The political leaders standing on their soapbox, pretending that they care about all the things that you just talked about, pretending they understand the sacrifice, and not understanding that their actions are exactly the actions that our brave men and women in uniform are fighting against. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the Netflix series, How to Become a Tyrant, but it starts with Hitler in the first episode, and it's absolutely appalling and shocking.
Yeah.
How, and it's one academic says, I know so many people would say, and they must have filmed this before COVID, so many people say that they would not have succumbed to the charms of a tyrant, somebody telling them that they have all the answers. And he said, I guarantee you would. And that's the test here, is we've seen it. We have 75% of the public who say, not only hit me, but hit me harder, and keep me away from those dirty unvaxxed. And even on the cover of the Toronto Star, saying, I want people who are unvaxxed to get sick and die, and I don't even care. I don't want them to get treatment. We're already hearing about people being denied treatment for not being vaccinated, being taken off the organ donor list. What are we becoming? What are we becoming?
Vile. That's vile and diabolical. Sorry.
It is diabolical.
Yeah, great stuff there, I think. And I do enjoy the commentary on, you know, how what we're seeing right now is exactly what men and women have died to prevent, to fight. Because, yeah, that's how I feel about it. That's why I wear the hat, right? Because we forget that people paid the ultimate price for these freedoms, whether it be here or in some shithole country overseas for kids we never met. But we believe in that stuff so much that we're willing to accept unlimited liability on behalf of everybody else and pay the ultimate sacrifice if need be. And this whole affair with COVID has just been a desecration of the graves of the fallen, in my view. So good on Danielle Smith, I think, for those comments. Okay, and here's Don Wilson, LLB. That means he's a lawyer. And he's at DNS Wilson, and he's got a pretty good tweet here. He's obviously a blue checkmark guy because it's super long. I just paid for my blue checkmark. I mean, I don't have many followers, but I thought I'd go ahead and dive in and try to leverage Twitter, the new Twitter, to the greatest extent that I can. So here's Don Wilson, and he says, a lot of people are getting upset having their conduct during COVID compared to Germans supporting the rise of Nazism. Let's recapitulate. A fifth of the population was legally classified as unclean. They were barred from most public spaces, including theaters, restaurants, movies, pubs, clubs, swimming pools, sporting events, concerts, conventions, etc. The Legion. To access public facilities, people had to carry a digital mark with them so authorities could confirm they weren't unclean. The unclean were fired and barred from most jobs, education, healthcare, courts, all public sector work, most major union jobs, and a wide smattering of major private employers. When they were fired, the unclean were denied employment insurance, the reasoning being that they had been fired for cause on account of being unclean. The unclean were banned from travel on trains, planes, and chartered boats. They had no legal means of leaving the country. Even if they wanted to, they could not escape the country that obviously hated them so. It became illegal to socialize with the unclean. They weren't allowed to attend weddings or funerals or visit sick relatives or friends in hospital. Special laws were made for the unclean, subjecting them to house arrest if they were around a person who had recently had a positive PCR test. The unclean had to continue to cover their faces in public when universal masking was dropped. It became socially acceptable to wish death upon the unclean in social media and in major news organizations. Public health figures and other politicians gave press conferences to shame and insult the unclean. The public developed shared pejorative names for them and relished in insulting the unclean. News media regularly ran polls asking if the unclean should be arrested or fined. Public figures openly and proudly spoke about withholding medically necessary health care from the unclean, letting them die. The unclean were removed from organ transplant lists, condemned to almost certain death. No end date for these measures was ever suggested, no timeline given. To the contrary, this was called the, quote, new normal, close quote. Criticizing any of these developments made you a social pariah and likely cost you most of your friendships and family relations, if not your job. The lesson of the Holocaust and of COVID isn't that Germans or Albertans or people of the 21st century are uniquely gullible or evil. It's that for most people, quote, morality, close quote, is not a matter of principle, but rather of adopting what they perceive to be a dominant group ideology, even if that ideology is marked by wanton irrationality or brutal inhumanity. Indeed, as in certain cults or gangs, the brutality or irrationality of the acts or beliefs required to signal group inclusion further entrench people into the ideology rather than repel them, a kind of perverse sunk cost fallacy writ large. So yes, if you're a typical person, Albertan, Canadian, or otherwise, it is overwhelmingly likely that you will have been a Nazi if you were born in Nazi Germany. If you cheered along lockdowns and mandates, that likelihood approaches certainty. Yes, absolutely. Well said, Don Wilson. Yeah, we failed the test, right? Canada, we failed the test. And yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that with that commentary, that everybody who ever got on board with the mask mandates or told somebody to get vaccinated, you failed the test. You would have been a Nazi. So, okay, here's Jake Shields. He's an MMA fighter and he's got some good tweets. So I like to follow him. And he says, so this is in reference to the deposition that's being done right now with Donald Trump. I showed a clip of him slaying the deposer there last week. It was pretty hilarious. She was basically accusing him of objectifying women. And then he was like, yes, of course I objectify women. Want to see how I do it? Here, I'm objectifying you right now. This is how I objectify women. You're an object. it was just like, I couldn't believe what he was saying. Well, yeah, I can. It's Trump. It was pretty hilarious. And so what's happening is, there's this sexual assault allegation here, and he was in court over this, and they found him not guilty of raping her, but she gets some kind of a defamation settlement because he criticized her publicly. He said she was a liar, I guess, publicly, something like that. So Jake Shields says, I can't be the only person skeptical Trump would sexually assault this woman. So, and he's just showing a picture over here. So, yeah, I mean, put that picture up next to Melania and tell me, this guy, there's just no way. Okay. And so here I am I'm retweeting the CNN clip here. Boomer female destroyed the West. So this is this woman who's at the center of the whole thing, and she's being interviewed on CNN, and this is Greg Price, and he's saying, breaking, a Manhattan jury just found Donald Trump liable in a civil lawsuit for E. Jean Carroll's claims of abuse and defamation, but rejects her claims that he raped her in the 90s. She's the lady who said, quote, rape is sexy, close quote, on CNN. Her lawsuit was also entirely funded by Democrat mega donor Reid Hoffman, who was recently exposed for hanging out on Jeffrey Epstein's island in 2014. Yeah, they don't call it the swamp for nothing. Okay.
You feel like a victim.
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished, which the word rape carries so many.
Okay, so The Chiron here on CNN says President Trump on his most recent accuser. It never happened. She's not my type. Oh my God.
Which the word rape carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt. It just
Well, I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Yes, she's clearly insane.
I was not thrown up.
Yeah, even Anderson Cooper's going like, okay, somebody failed to screen this one, so this guest. Okay, and here's something that I reported on here before. There was a Fuck Trudeau rally that just sort of organically popped up, as far as I was aware, in a Canadian Tire parking lot. And apparently there's another one planned here. It was planned for Saturday, May 13th, 2023, 7 p.m., Canadian Tire parking lot, 2510 Hyde Park Gate, Oakville, Ontario. And BK Belton here, I'm pretty sure I know what her name is, but she's tweeting, hate rally update. I just spoke with the customer service rep at Canadian Tire Oakville, who assured me this wasn't going to take place. Quote, corporate is taking care of it and it's not going to happen, close quote. Honk, honk, hooray. Okay, so Convoy Watch, they're the ones retweeting this, and they say Canadian Tire shut down this event quickly. So yeah, it's all terrible, obviously. It's these were kids, as far as I could tell when I was watching the video. It was mostly young people that were holding these events. And man, oh man, I mean, could you just imagine this happening, well, at any other time? But we had like the Summer of Love back in the 60s, 70s, all these different urban riots and that the boomers engaged in, and nobody did this to them. And here we have young people, like, they're just fed up and they're left without a voice. And we have all these adults going around throwing them under the bus, and everybody seems to be on board with it. So maybe jump into the battle space over here on Twitter. And here's Darren, and he's saying, if you don't want a shit show in town of Oakville, I'd spread the word faster than these shit stains trying to spread the word. So there's been a campaign here. Maureen Hooper is asking, is this being supported by Canadian Tire? It must be if they're allowing it to happen in their parking lot. Maybe I'll stop shopping there. And Canadian Tire is responding, Canadian Tire is not affiliated with this event, and permission for use of the parking lot for this activity has not been granted. So I don't know. They're saying that they shut it down. Canadian Tire might just be saying, like, nobody asked us, but it's not clear to me. But and over here, City of Guelph is saying, we're installing Rainbow Crosswalk this month, and we want to hear what you need from us as a city to feel included, safe, and celebrated in Guelph. Comments are anonymous. Let us know here by May 14th. And down here, you can see, well, the picture is of the Rainbow Crosswalk. And down here, it says, who can reply? People at City of Guelph mentioned can reply. And the City of Guelph is saying, we have turned off comments on this post to ensure that all who view it can do so in an environment that is respectful to all. Okay, so that blew up in their faces. I don't think there's a whole lot of support, especially on Twitter for this kind of stuff anymore. It's very clearly part of the PSYOP. It's part of the commie PSYOP. And no, I'm not on board with turning all the children into pharmacological livestock and permanent medical patients. So I saw this and I just kind of wanted to touch on it because this is the Toronto Sun. So this is kind of a right-leaning, ostensibly, outlet here in Canada. And the title here is Germany saw more politically motivated crimes in 2022. The number of hate crimes rose 11,520 cases, with 3 out of 4 motivated by far-right ideology. So I'm just going to call BS on this. What's interesting, I just kind of want to talk about the framing a little bit, so I'll read. The number of politically motivated crimes reported in Germany rose by 7% last year, the country's top security official said Tuesday. So politically motivated, that could be anything, both sides. Overall, Germany registered 58,961 politically motivated crimes last year, most of which were for offenses such as damage of property, insults or incitement to hatred, holding illegal gatherings, or displaying Nazi symbols. So all of that, I think, could probably fit within what the CBC would call those kids, like holding illegal gatherings or displaying Nazi symbols. Like they call everybody Nazis. So I'm just color me skeptical. However, 4,043 were classified as violent crimes, an increase of 4%, the minister said. There was a significant rise in crimes that could not be assigned to the traditional motivations of right-wing or left-wing ideology, Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said. A significant proportion of these, quote, diffuse, close quote, offenses, which rose by 13% to 24,080 cases, were in connection with coronavirus restrictions or protests related to the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, and the rising cost of living, Faeser told reporters in Berlin. So it sounds to me that like they're just talking about regular people who are standing up to the establishment's agenda when they say this kind of thing, when it's related to all of the problems that we're having right now, like the response to the global pandemic, the government mandates, this manufactured war in Ukraine, the manufactured energy crisis. So yeah, I mean, I'm not on board with any of this stuff. So according to these people, I'm some kind of a right-wing extremist. But Tucker Carlson is also a right-wing extremist, according to CNN. That's how ludicrous it's gotten. The minister stresses that the biggest threat to German society is still the far-right extremism, of which 23,493 cases were recorded. She said that 41% of all victims of politically motivated crimes were injured by far-right extremists. Holger Munk, the president of the Federal Criminal Police Office, said that even among the, quote, diffuse, close quote, crimes, around 2/3 of the perpetrators were more likely to reject the country's authorities and express far-right ideology when questioned. So what's far-right ideology? Is it Friedrich Hayek and the Constitution of Liberty? Is it Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations? What are we talking about here? The number of hate crimes rose by 10% to 11,520 cases, with 3 out of 4 hate crimes motivated by far-right ideology. And the hate crimes thing, when I see reporting on this, the thing is, like, I did a deep dive on this like years ago even, and I've been following it for a while, and I should probably present some materials on this. But there is, especially since 2017 in Canada, they've been changing definitions of extremism to include more and more human behavior that is nonviolent. So when they talk about far-right extremism, like most people think that means some kind of a terrorist attack, or at least something involving violence. But it could mean somebody put bacon on a doorknob of a mosque, that kind of thing. That would be considered a hate crime under the definitions that we're using right now. So extremism too, that'd be a hate crime, that'd be extremism. So I think that's probably what they're talking about. And there's also some backlash that we're seeing overseas. I've shown a couple of videos before of, say, for example, Swedish people subduing a migrant who was being violent towards a child, and this is like, we're seeing attacks on subways, all of the mass transit. Where there, I've mentioned, like in Sweden, they had no-go zones with grenade problems. They've had rape gangs in Britain. I saw, like, basically the entire city of Liverpool was coming out in protest with doing a candlelit vigil for the victims of the child sex trafficking going on out there. So a lot of this could be, just the backlash that a lot of people are facing because of the crime wave that they've imported from violent countries in the third world. So the number of hate crimes rose by 10% to 11,520 cases, with 3 out of 4 hate crimes motivated by far-right ideology. Crimes against refugees rose by 9% overall, but violent crimes against refugees were up by 22%. And I don't doubt that those are taking place, that there are some violent crimes, and that there are some people out there that, are engaging in some very bad behavior. It's not necessarily all self-defense. I'm not making that claim. So crimes committed by the so-called Reichsbürger or Reichscitizens movement also increased sharply by 39.7% to 1,865 cases. Among them, a coup attempt was foiled by the authorities in December. The movement rejects the post-war partition of Germany and the democratic states that followed, arguing that the pre-war Reich still exists. The overall number of anti-Semitic crimes went down by 12.75%, the minister said. An association of counseling centers for victims of far right-wing racist and anti-Semitic violence, the BVRG, told reporters at a separate press conference Tuesday that the rise of racist attacks in Germany has created an atmosphere of fear among members of minority groups such as immigrants, refugees, Jews, and the LGBTQ2I. I put a 2 in there. They keep changing it. Every article's got a different acronym. LGBTQI community. As an example, they pointed to an incident that took place on the weekend in the East German state of Brandenburg, which is bordering the German capital, where a group of high school students from Berlin, many of them with immigrant roots, were attacked by local youths. The Berlin high school students who were staying at a youth camp in Hindesse in the Dami-Spiewald County felt so threatened that they had to leave the camp overnight with police protection. I'd be interested in knowing what the events are that precipitated this. Was this just a spontaneous attack? Because, like I said, the backlash that I've been showing here has been coming, like they're like regular people. They're older people. They're just subduing migrants and calling for police and things like that. So yeah, I mean, and I'm always pointing to things like there was the 1,000 sexual assaults that took place in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve in 2015, immediately following the migrant crisis. And there's been a real rise in the sexual assaults, no-go zones, and violent crime overall since then. So these people are dealing with a lot of problems that are now trying to be replicated here in North America. Robert Kusch from the VBRG said the real numbers of attacks in Germany are likely much higher, as many crimes don't even get registered because victims don't come forward to report attacks. Okay, so I just thought that was strange coming from the Toronto Sun, but maybe that's just me. And what are we talking about here when we say far right? And what are we talking about when we say violence? Because or extremism in particular, because these words don't even seem to mean anything anymore. Tucker Carlson is a right-wing extremist. And so, yeah, I think that what we're probably seeing here is more in line with some pretty, not so troublesome behavior. It's probably not even organized for the most part. They'll throw in a group here and there. Okay, so this is some good news. I just wanted to kind of close things out with this. Is Phelan Fox. This is a transgender woman, aka a man, masquerading as a woman, dressed up in woman face, who's a transgender MMA fighter. And this is just one of the most brutal kind of stories you'd ever want to hear, because Phelan Fox has basically maimed women in the female MMA arena. And anyway, he just got his ass kicked by a girl. So here we go.
Miletich with you. Outside leg kick from Phelan Fox early on. Look for the right hand of Ashley Evans-Smith. She locks onto a single leg of Phelan. Gets Phelan on her back. Drills some ground and pound. Side control. Cuts the hip in. Evans-Smith in trouble! Here comes Phelan Fox jerking it out! Ashley's almost done! Gotta fight out of there, gotta fight out of there. She runs away from Phelan to catch her here. Oh. She does! Phelan was momentarily knees buckled as Ashley corner. A sweet 1-2. Rolled her through, headlock. To put the hooks in. She's got one hook in, and the crowd is rallying for Ashley Evans-Smith. Ashley's been here before. She wrestled her whole life. Ashley Evans-Smith is completely derailing her, pounding away to the face of Fox. Fox with nowhere to go. Ashley Evans-Smith unloaded. It's going down, Irene! She's done it! She's done it! She's done it! Ashley Evans Smith!
Yeah. All right. So that's we got to highlight those wins when we get them. All right. And now we're back to Plato. So remember, good people do not need laws to tell them to act responsibly. No, that's not what the law is there for. The law is there to punish the guilty, and mercy for the guilty is cruelty to the victims. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of these catch and release policies right now. Is it's just despicably cruel, and throughout the pandemic response, the state has been just despicably cruel, and our own people have been despicably cruel to one another throughout all of this. And I think it's just it's awful that we're adopting these catch and release policies here now too. But it's part of the war, guys. That's just kind of how I see it. Is we're in the throes of World War III, even though it hasn't been declared and it's not kinetic. It's a lot of cultural. It's in the cultural space, the legal space. It's in the information battle space. So yeah, I mean, that's where I am. I'm stepping into the information battle space, and don't take it personally, right? That's the thing. Is it's really hard to let this stuff get you down, and just remember that it's a war, so you can't take it personally. We're going to take casualties, and we're not going to save all the children. That's really just the fact of the matter. Kind of harsh truths that you need to accept in order to be able to maintain a level head throughout all of this. So let me see. Cindy is giving me the flexes. So right on. That's probably in reference to the Phelan Fox defeat there. Yeah, that was really good to see. I think that's a win for women everywhere. So it was really great to see. And Steve is saying, happy Wednesday, friends. Have a good one, Steve. Thanks for being with us. And let's see, Cindy is just saying, thanks, Jeff, as always. Sister garden is prepared and ready for planting. That's your sister's garden. Sorry, I didn't say that right. All right, sounds good. I'm glad to hear people are prepping. That's an area that I could definitely stand to improve in. I got my emergency food supply, so hopefully I don't need it. And Steve is saying, stay free and say no to your abusers. And Marion is saying, really appreciate your work, Jeff. All right, thanks, Marion. And thanks again, everybody, for being with me. Another one in the books. And until next time, stay frosty and stay safe out there.